Welcome, everybody out there, our audience, several hundred of you, welcome. It's Thursday, the 5th of November. Can't believe it's already heading into that time of the year. And we are going to have a conversation about small business and why small business is the heart of our economy. My guest today is Allon Raiz. He's the founder and CEO of Raizcorp, which has been in business for 20 years. And I believe he has helped more than 13,000 entrepreneurial businesses get on their feet and, more importantly, stay on their feet. And as such, he's probably a very familiar face to many of you. It's lovely to have you here today, Allon. So welcome.
Thanks, Sasha. Thanks for that intro.
Yeah, I think the fact that there are so many people with us today just goes to show the interest that we as South Africans have in entrepreneurial businesses, and never before has the interest in SMEs been quite as high. I think COVID, I think the lockdown, I think the economic catastrophe that followed it has done plenty to shine a light on the role that informal business, small business, medium business can play in the creation of sustainable economic growth and jobs in South Africa. And I know, Allon, that you also believe that entrepreneurs hold the key to unlocking wealth in South Africa. And I know also that many of the individuals watching and listening with us today have the same belief. We did a survey ahead of this webinar, and 84% of them believe that SMEs are the future. But we're saying all of this, but I don't get the sense that that's really happening. And Allon, I want to know if you get the sense. Do you believe that SMEs, that we're riding a wave, that SMEs are growing and thriving and will become the kind of the meat in our economy? And if you don't agree, then why are we not seeing it?
Sure, that's a hectic first opening question. But let me first of all respond by I will get to your question, but I just want to talk to the term SME, that you use the term SME or SMME. I think that's a big part of the problem, is the term small, medium, micro enterprise. Anyone who is in a business as an entrepreneur understands that a micro business, one-person operation, has got very different issues to a medium-sized business, which has got 250 or 300 or 500 staff. It's not the same thing. And so why I'm starting there to answer your question there is because I think from a policy point of view, when you have a SME policy, you're missing the point already in terms of the fact that you cannot have the same government policy associated with the micro business and a medium-sized business. And that's a big part of the problem. And so I just wanted to maybe start there. Do I believe that entrepreneurs are the way to unlock wealth? Absolutely. But then if the question is who is and who isn't an entrepreneur? If you look at the psychological typology, what they call the psychological typology of an entrepreneur, in other words, the following characteristics equals an entrepreneur, you will read book after book after book, which will show you that there is no such thing as an entrepreneur. You cannot define an entrepreneur through characteristics. So they're tall, they're short, they're black, they're white, they come from poor backgrounds, rich backgrounds, they're extroverts, introverts, they're financially literate, financially illiterate. So there's this notion of what is an entrepreneur is also quite a hard thing to get your hands on. So now you're trying to create, sorry?
No, carry on.
So now you're trying to create policy in an environment where you've got a government who's not understanding the actual context of a small business, the real thing that's going on. And then it's even more difficult because there is no such thing as an entrepreneur, technically. And then you've got then different types of these things that you can't define, these entrepreneurs, which is survivalists, lifestyleists, and growth entrepreneurs. So where do you focus your policy? And then add that to sort of our history where the economic power was not only centralized racially, but it was also centralized that you had the big five of everything. So you've got these very dominant players in each sector that basically squeeze out the small business. So that I'm painting a bleak picture, but that's really the context that we are trying to thrive in.
Sure. So you've thrown it right back at me, because you've raised an equal number of issues in your reply. But I'm intrigued, and will you unpack a little bit more for us on the subject of the survivalist, the growth, and the lifestyle SME or business? Word SME for the time being, because that, as you say, that's confusing. But what is the difference between those businesses, and do you treat them all differently?
So the three. So just I'm going to. So it's all a function of desire to grow. If this was a XY curve, it's their level of growth, but their desire to their size and their profitability and their desire to grow. So a survivalist business is generally a one-person operation and has a very low desire to grow. It's normally a person who is very comfortable working on their own, and they are above or below the survival line. In other words, they're making money or not. Lifestyle entrepreneurs are generally up to 10, 12 people in an organization, normally a family business. They can make quite a bit of money, but they have small operations and don't have a real internal desire to grow. And growth entrepreneurs have got a huge desire to grow. And if you ask, for example, Richard Branson why he wants to open up another Virgin anything, he doesn't know why. It's just because I want to see how big this thing gets before I die. Ask Raymond Ackerman if he wants to why he wants to open up another Pick and Pay. It's not about money, it's about something else. So in that definition of lifestyle, I'm going to keep the survivalist out of this. But between lifestyle and growth entrepreneur, there's a fundamental difference in strategy. The lifestyle entrepreneur's strategy when we work with entrepreneurs and trying to identify them as either lifestyle or growth, lifestyle entrepreneurs is about specialization. That's the right strategy for a lifestyle business. So an example of that, just to use maybe a doctor, a GP versus a heart surgeon. It's about specialization. Then you're less price sensitive and you make more margin. A growth entrepreneur is about system and process. And the way that you can determine if you are, I'll give you a quick little test that you can do at home all by yourself, is ask yourself if you are the kind of person that says the following: if you want to do something properly, you've got to do it yourself. If that's what you say, you're a lifestyle entrepreneur. I'm worried that my staff will steal my IP, lifestyle entrepreneur. My clients only want to see me, lifestyle entrepreneur. And it's all about, so the growth entrepreneur says, I know that's a problem, but I've put in systems and process to replace me. The lifestyle entrepreneur is the business. And so it's different strategies. So
those two individuals, can anybody be an entrepreneur? Are we born? I know you are the son of an entrepreneurial family. You're an entrepreneur yourself. Are entrepreneurs created in a certain cooking pot, or can anybody be an entrepreneur? What are the characteristics that you look for when someone comes to you? Can you see if someone's innately an entrepreneur?
So wherever I speak around the world, there's somebody in the audience that asks the question, are entrepreneurs born or are they made? And it's the wrong question. A few years ago, a piece of research came out of the US which showed that the most successful first-time entrepreneurs were 60 years and older. And when you sort of think about that piece of research, it sort of breaks the question, because if somebody was working at a corporate for 30 years, they weren't born that way and they weren't made that way. Something else was going on. So that started a whole journey for me. So this is my hypothesis, is they're neither born or made. They precipitate when there are certain conditions in place. So certain conditions have to be in place. The first is that they have to have a tolerance for pain. Okay, you have to have a tolerance for pain. So every entrepreneur who's watching this knows how much rejection we get, especially you come up with the idea and then you go and tell your wife and she says it's a really crappy idea. And then you go to work and then you tell your people, your friends at work this, and they tell you it's a crappy idea, but you still persist, and then you start this little business, or you have this MVP, the minimum viable product, and you go to market, and the market tells you it's a crappy idea. Everyone's telling you it's a crappy idea. So you're trying to push through that. So you have to have this tolerance for pain. That tolerance for pain can come any point in your life. You can get more tolerance for it later, depending on your level of self-confidence. The second is your tolerance for risk. If you think about a curve, if I'm a 25-year-old, I'm carefree, I've got no kids, and I've got an idea, and I've got the same tolerance for pain as somebody else who's maybe 50 and has got 2 kids in a private school and a bond, my tolerance for risk is very different. Coming back to the 60-year-olds, I've got now, if you look at the curve, they've paid off their house, the kids are out of home, they've got a much higher tolerance for risk. They almost emulate the 25-year-old in terms of risk. So that talks to that. Then there is the ability to learn and iterate. So about applying learning that you have from the market or feedback from the market in the business. If you don't have that ability to learn and iterate, you won't, in my opinion, precipitate past the idea. So you see this, that I do a trick now, and anyone who's an entrepreneur, if this were an audience, I'd say to you, how many of you are entrepreneur? You put up your hand, and keep up your hand up if you've got the same idea, you're in the same business that you were in day one, if it's all exactly as you started, and 100% of their hands come down. So that means that those people are still in business because they've learned from the market and iterated. The fourth thing is that they have to be able to see an opportunity or have a crisis in their life, or both. And so every entrepreneur, and that's why COVID is so interesting, is because it's created, I wouldn't say an artificial crisis, but it's certainly created a global crisis. And you're seeing that as a precipitory event for a lot of entrepreneurs, because you need either a crisis or to see an opportunity. So any entrepreneur who's watching this right now, if I ask you, was there a crisis and or an opportunity that you saw, that all has to be 100%. So those are the conditions that need to be present. And when those are present, then you precipitate as an entrepreneur.
So to me, it sounds then like we have many of those conditions and those characters in South Africa. Yet often we tell ourselves that we don't have an entrepreneurial culture in South Africa, and we're always looking for ways to become more of a country of self-starters and entrepreneurial. What would you say to that? Are we entrepreneurial, or have we got a way to go?
Yeah, so I'm going to give you a sort of a complex answer back. So I'm going to sound like a politician. It depends. So if you look at the GEM report, which is a global entrepreneurship monitor, which has been a report out for many, many years, it shows South Africa as one of the lowest rates of total entrepreneurial activity in developing countries. But if you look at that, you have to say that you have to look at that number relatively to other countries. So, for example, in Japan, America, the UK, etc., the TEA rates are close to 1% of the population, whereas we're sitting at around 6 or 7%, depending on 4 to 8%, depending on which report you read, and you see Uganda at 22%. But so that says there's a certain amount of entrepreneurial activity. But entrepreneurs are like a doctor or a lawyer. They're parts of society, and they hold a role in society of challenging norm, creating newness, innovation, driving economic wealth, etc. But they are just a function. They're no better or worse than. And why I'm a little loath to answer that question is because what I find, I've been doing this for 20 years, is that the view of entrepreneurs 20 years ago and what it is now they're rock stars, and we've got Elon Musk and we've got all these rock star entrepreneurs. If you ask your parents, in the 60s, like, if you were like really, really dumb at school and couldn't get a job, then you'd become an entrepreneur. And so this was global. that they were really looked down upon. It's only now since the 90s that entrepreneurs are starting to be, venerated and seen as something interesting. But I don't think they're more or less important. I just want to make that statement. Coming back to the culture, I've spoken in the articles which we've had on Daily Maverick about a chance meeting I had with a Dr. Diane Francis, who is a Canadian working in America, and her view is that shame-based societies have a lower level of entrepreneurial activity than fear-based societies. And she used the Commonwealth, she's from Canada, part of the Commonwealth. Children should be seen and not heard. We keep up with the Joneses. Like we don't like failure. We poo-poo it. Versus America, that's afraid of it. And the common story there is the story about a young entrepreneur goes to, in South Africa, comes to somebody like me and says, can you back me, fund me, invest in me? And I go, have you failed? And they go, yes, I failed. And I'll say, okay, I'll get back to you. Whereas you go to in America, and that same individual come back and say, I haven't failed, and then I'd say failed 3 times and then come to me because I value that failure. So people aren't afraid of it. And if you think about our language in South Africa, think about shame, man. We're a shame-based society, and our structure is set up where we blacklist people who have failed. The whole system basically makes sure that if you fail, you stay failed. It's very hard from a system point of view, or let's call it a formal system point of view, to come out from there. You have to go via the sides, the informal place. So long answer to quite a simple question. Sorry.
We can't change who we are as a people overnight. I guess we are who we are. We have a society that is shaped by events long before us. So we have to just forge ahead. So my next question is, let's assume that you've been retrenched, or someone's been retrenched, or they've taken a voluntary severance package, because there have been lots of those, and they're keen to start up on their own. They've got maybe, as you said, a little bit of pension, a little bit of savings. Is there a particular industry that's quite buoyant at the moment that lends itself to entrepreneurs right now? I mean, clearly you're not going to suggest that they're going to open a restaurant.
I might do. I know restaurants that are doing really, really well. I'll give you the answer. I have a mentor from the age of 25 when I was a young man starting out as an entrepreneur. I had a billionaire mentor, dollar billionaire mentor, who I asked the question, so how do you make money? Like, it was like this big question, like, you've made money, how do I make money? Like, how's it all done? And his answer was that you can make money from anything as long as you are 1% better than anyone else. And so that for me, that's sort of, you can make money from air, from litter. You can make money from anything as long as you're slightly better than anyone else. And so to me, coming back to the restaurant, I wouldn't say you shouldn't go into restaurants, and I wouldn't say you should go into restaurants. If you do go, you have to come with an angle where you are slightly better than anyone else. And I feel that often that this kind of question comes, I get this question often, what is the big industry? What's the trend? People want trends and where it's going. It's too late. If I tell you what the trend is, it's already too late. The people who are going to make money in that already have got the head start. So to me, it's a more of I can make money out of anything. What do I have? How can I bring my core competencies, my skills, my networks to bear, and use that in a way that can be used in a business where I can be slightly better than my competitors? And that's a healthier and probably a more pragmatic approach to that answer.
Allon, do you need to be better than your competitors? Do you need to be more aggressive? Do we need aggression? Do we need dog eat dog? Do we need that attitude, or should we leave that behind when we cross over the step?
So I'm. All right. Let me. So my quick answer is yes. You do need aggression. It's the type of aggression that I think is important. The dog is one type of aggression, but to me, I've seen. I'm invested in a whole bunch of businesses, and I brought at the beginning of COVID. I brought them all into a Zoom room, and we spoke about. Our attitude going forward. And it was quite clear that within those CEOs, there were basically two types of CEOs in the room. The one type of CEO, which was aggressive, and the other type of CEO, which was sitting in a corner and protective. And to me, I've seen the stark difference in their businesses. The ones that were aggressive and said, okay, I'm going to fight now, for market share, I'm going to fight now, have done incredibly well over this time. And the ones that were protective are the ones that have basically atrophied over this time. So to me, and I'm a very strong believer in that aggression, that desire of growth, which has got a lot of negative connotations, but it's not at all costs. And I think that's when you say aggressive dog eat dog, it's not at all costs, because to me, the people who are aggressive and are short-term thinkers are the ones that basically just close the market off at some point. They become too aggressive. The market doesn't want to work with them, and they disappear. So you have to balance that with a long-term view.
Yeah, I think maybe I used the wrong word. I think, well, I've refined it. I don't think it's aggression then that you're talking about. It's a whole combination of positive attitude, forward thinking. Seize the moment kind of attitude. So I have a question from one of our viewers out there today, and he wants to know, or she, I confess I don't know, and they want to know, why is it impossible, or why is it so difficult to get funding as a mature white person with 30 years plus, touching back on who are the entrepreneurs in our society, with 30 years plus of work experience. And they're saying, is this not the experience base that should be tapped? And actually, we can use that experience base to upskill the next generation of entrepreneurs.
So I think, first of all, I think it's irrelevant whether, I think it's difficult for anyone with any level of experience to get funding right now. If you look at the banks and all the credit providers right now, everyone's incredibly skittish right now, and basically wants a 1.25 or 1.5 times cover in terms of collateral before they even lend you a cent. I know even, we've got instances with some of our businesses where they want you to put cash up as collateral for cash. It just doesn't make sense. So I don't think this is particular to just one grouping of people. I think this is everywhere. My view is that that money is always available, and the formal channels are there, which is the banking system, but there's a whole bunch of other informal financial providers, from angel funders to private equity players to the normal one, friends, fools, and family. The 3 Fs. There's a lot of other means. So if you maybe broaden your horizon as to where you're trying to source the money from, you might find that money easier. And then, of course, there are a lot of, let's call it official alternative funding players, such as Spartan or the like. But they're out there, and they're taking the gap where the formal banks cannot play.
So I'm presuming if that's me that you're talking to, if I just sit here and I don't want to go to my bank, if I sit and Google, it's possible to come up with a list of possibilities that I can go into. Yeah, there's a question from Noel, who wants to know, how do you find these angel investors and these VC investors? And I think that's probably a common question. Some
research. So the way that the especially the angels work is that they have got networks. So they're invisible networks that you have to try and find. So you have to try and you go, do you know anyone else has had the angel funding? What are the criteria? And then you try and get into that network. They aren't easy to find, but if you want to, they're all there. Like in Johannesburg, as an example, I can name, and I won't, but I can name at least 15 angel funders that are looking for deal flow, and they all have specialities and are looking for particular types of deal flow. And so they're there. If I know 15, it's like I can rattle them off. Then there must be many, many more. So I think it's important to try and actually do the work to find them.
And if I went to somewhere like Business Partners, for example, would they say to me, we can't help you, but try X, Y, and Z? I mean, is the network that supportive?
So they would, because I know Business Partners refers some people, not directly. I asked them, how do you come to me? And they'll say, Business Partners referred me to you. So I think there is a network. There is a network of referral. I refer people where I believe that they. So referral is an interesting thing, because at one level, if I refer somebody who's really, really bad, it looks bad on me. But if I say to someone, look, Sasha came to me, it's not for me. I know it's what you do, so I'll refer it to you. I did that the other day. I referred somebody, and actually it was to a private bank. I referred them to a private bank because they had come to me. It wasn't what I did, and I referred them to the bank for that. But I knew the people, I trusted the individuals, and I was happy to be the person to refer. Now, if those networks are in place, it works. But often people just will refer and go, well, don't speak to us, go speak to, Raizcorp or Partner Elite or whatever the case may be.
And Allon, we've spoken on previous webinars a little bit about people who start a side hustle while they are employed. And I've got a question here from Rob Jackson, who wants to know whether angels, whether they're VCs or angels or formal investment houses, would they consider investing in somebody who actually has a formal job at the same time? Or do you have to be 100% committed?
So I'd say the probability is that they wouldn't, unless it was a temporary situation. You couldn't convince them that it was just that you would move over at some point. Any investor wants to know that you are 110% committed to ensuring that they get a return on their money. They don't want you to sort of have it as a sideline little hobby, and they're going to take the risk as their hobby. So if you can convince them that the reason you are here is basically as an alternative funding for your salary, but at X point, when the business hits X amount of revenue or profitability or whatever the case may be, at that point, I will become 100% involved in the business, then you've got a higher probability. But just generally, if you came to me and you had that, I would say at some point you've got to jump. And many of the angel funders, they also will fund that jump if they believe in you enough. In other words, they'll take a view on your salary. But this is an important caveat. If you come in with the same fancy salary you were having at the corporate, they're unlikely to fund that. And that's the big stumbling block between when people coming in with investors, where they're coming in from a corporate where they were earning a sometimes obscene salaries, in my opinion, and then they want to continue that. And the communication that you're making to the investor is, I'm going to take no risk in this, no pain. You take all the risk and you take the pain, and I'll be okay, Jack. And so it's important that you show that I was earning X obscene and I'm earning half obscene. And so I'm taking risk and pain with you. And in those instances, you've got a higher likelihood of getting the funding.
Okay. So let's come back to the individual who wants to start their own business. They want to work for themselves, be their own boss, and everything that one dreams about. Would you recommend that they start perhaps a side hustle from home while they're still employed, if they are fortunate enough to be employed? Or is it better to go in boots and all, take your pension and dive in 100%? I mean, is there a right way or a wrong way to go about this?
I think just from there's a romantic answer and then there's a pragmatic answer. The pragmatic answer is definitely have the side hustle with a strong view to a jump. What I've seen very often is that the entrepreneurs don't jump. They have the side hustle and it just ticks along, and then they go, well, I'm making X and I'm making half X, and 1.5X is actually fine. I don't need to do. I'm just dandy here, yeah, because they know the moment they jump, they're going from 1.5X to half X. Okay, so and that prevents them from making the jump. So that's the negative of running a side hustle at the same time as being in a job. But pragmatically, if you've got a family to feed and you've got a bond to pay off and you've got expenses, you're wanting to get a sort of a financial run up to ensure that you have got the highest probability of closing that very pragmatic and real gap of your overhead and your income. But that has to come concurrently with reducing your overhead. And that comes back to the fancy salary. Is very often people cannot. They've bonded themselves to the hilt. They've bought a fancy car every 2 years, and they're very, very geared. And so they can't leave. They can't drop their salary. So they basically have got those golden handcuffs. And the system, the corporate system, is designed to design that way to keep you sort of locked in that way. It encourages the fancy cars, etc. So yeah, so it's once again not a straightforward answer.
Just chatting to our viewers here, Timothy. I haven't seen your question. Will you phrase it again for us because it's got lost? And then I've got a question here from Jeremy Kruger, and I think he's getting a little bit philosophical here, but let's go there before I ask you the next question on getting your business set up. And he wants to know, I think, really, what is the definition of a successful business? And is it only about the bottom line and how much money you can make for yourself? Or is it about empowering the people around you, personal satisfaction, family time, a platform that's inclusive, has a business that has a positive socioeconomic impact? And I think that's probably an answer that we could discuss over several bottles of wine, but can you give us an answer in a nutshell?
So I think it is what it is for you personally. So if I look at myself, for me, it's not about just the bottom line. It's also about impact. So I will not do anything unless I have impact we grow entrepreneurs, and if I don't believe, if I can make money and not have impact, I will walk away from the deal. And if I can do impact and not make money, I'll also walk away from the deal. So that's my personal reconciliation of how I do it. Others will have a view that a successful business is just about the bottom line, and others, if I was very socially inclined, it will be all about the impact. I think everyone has to find their own definition and express that in their businesses. What is a problem is when it's all about the impact and then the business isn't making a profit, and you can't have impact because you aren't making a profit, because you basically can't exist anymore. And I see that very often with people who come from social enterprises. We do programs with social entrepreneurs, and it's their relationship with money that is a big issue, is that they somehow see if they make a profit that's a bad thing. I don't see profit as a bad thing. I see it as what you do with that profit. For example, I don't take a dividend. I just reinvest it back in. That's my choice. Other people take a dividend and have a fancy car. That's their choice. There's no judgment. You just have to find your particular definition.
Absolutely. So this is another question from our audience, and I think it comes to you've got an idea now. You want to start your business, but you need to really identify your market. You need to establish who your market is. You need to find out where they are and answer their need. How do businesses go about doing that? And does it come back to levels of education? Does it come back to having a degree and a specialization in finance or medicine? I mean, what do you need to identify your market and move forward, take your business to the next, or your business idea to the next level?
I don't know if I quite understood the question, but I'll take a shot at it. So to me,
it's about markets. Like, who is your market? What is your market? Where is your market? I think that's the question that's being asked.
Okay. So from my perspective, first of all, just to answer the academic thing, I'm degreed and all that, but I don't. If somebody is not degreed, I don't believe that they can't be a good entrepreneur. In fact, there's all sorts of research that shows that the more educated you are, the less risk tolerance you have, and the less likely you'll be an entrepreneur. But there is an interesting dynamic around that if there has to be a base financial literacy in that, no matter what level of education you have. So I don't believe it's a function of education. To find your markets, how do you find your markets? For me, it's about actually doing the work. And one of the books I wrote was called Lose the Business Plan, and I've got a whole section on there. I won't say the words because this is a public forum, but you'll interpret from the letters. It's called BS market research, right? And the BS market research is when you go to your friends and family and say, would you buy this? And they go, oh, that's so very nice. I definitely would buy that. It's how wonderful. And so you go into the business, and then you go to them and they go, oh, I've just spent my budget and I've just bought something similar, and they don't support you. And that's because you've been very, very focused on where you want to get the information from. So entrepreneurs very often do BS market research and get a positive result, which is generally a false positive, because they want it so badly to be true. And so when I speak with entrepreneurs, I'm very aware of that tendency and ensure that they do, I'm going to say, proper market research, which is both desktop research, going out there, going ask a little bit of competitive analysis and really sort of plodding the streets, or walking the streets and getting that information. And any investor worth their salt would be able to see flimsy research versus proper research and proper understanding of a market.
Okay. So Timothy is asking us, and he's quite clear about where he's going with his business. He has a poultry farming operation that he wants to start. And he wants to know, is it easy to find partners for those kinds of businesses? And do you know such people? Poultry operations, I guess, are fairly capital and labor intensive, and they probably need more hands.
I don't know any, and so I couldn't refer. But from all there are a lot of the IDC, NEF, there are a lot of funds, and I know there's going to be I know what the reaction is, but there are those funds out there that would look at agriculture, and agriculture is getting a huge amount of attention right now in South Africa, and so it's ironically a lot easier now to find funding in agriculture than before, but to me, is also where on the value chain it is. If it's value add, there's a high likelihood of getting funding than if it's in the pure production. Pure production of whether it's poultry or maize has got very high risk associated with it. And there's certain specialist funders who understand each of those sectors and would or wouldn't fund. Now, if you start up and you're very small, those type of funders generally would poo-poo a small investment. So Timothy, I think, is in a little bit of a quandary and might have to use alternative funding, friends, fools and family, etc., in order to fund a smaller operation. I don't know how big it is, but I'm assuming that it might be a smaller operation versus a highly scaled operation.
While we're talking about funders like the IDC and so on, Jeremy's asking us what your thoughts are on CEDA and CIFA, and if you will explain CEDA and CIFA to us. I think CEDA is Small Enterprise Development Agency.
And the one's finance. The one deals with finance.
Small Enterprise Finance Agency.
Yeah, so I'm going to take the Fifth Amendment fifth on this one. I would rather not answer that question. No comment.
Okay. They could be improved. Let me say it.
Okay. No comment.
So now we're starting our business. We've done research. We've found a market. And Mpilo wants to know, is digital marketing the way to go?
So digital marketing it's a very interesting journey. First of all, I think that any entrepreneur that doesn't understand digital marketing is bound to fail. That you've got to understand it. But very often it's not understood properly, and people have, especially now, during COVID, have misinterpreted like a website as their brochure under glass. That there isn't the functionality of that. There isn't the search engine optimization attached to it, and people interact with digital differently to how they do in physical, and people react from a marketing point of view differently to digital marketing than they do to physical. And so to me, 100%, all the CEOs that I'm involved in I drive the understanding of the nuance around digital marketing. And it is so nuanced, not just from a social media, but from a digital formats. It's very, very vast. And most people just think it's just about Facebook ads. That's all it is. And it's so much more than that.
Okay. So in other words, take a course and learn how to do it.
Yes. And there's a lot of free stuff on the internet around that. So huge amount of free information on that.
And Allon, what happens if you've done everything right? You've started this business, you've thrown your heart and your soul into it, and it's failed. Well, first of all, how do you know? I mean, it's one thing when it's failed and you've got creditors kind of coming at you from all sides, but how do you see from 3 steps back that it's going to fail? So the first question is, how do you know when to pull the plug? And then the second question is, what do you do after that?
All right. So first of all, I'm pro-life when it comes to entrepreneurship. And what I mean by that is, for as long as you can keep persevering, push through. I've been personally through 5 years and 2 months of losses. And I literally, I had borrowed so much money. And I had been doing things like what they call kite flying, which I didn't even know at the time. I swear to God, I didn't know it was illegal, where you borrow from one credit card and you pay another credit card. But I told people that's illegal. I didn't know it at the time. And I did borrow from this friend to pay that friend. So I've been through there. And I've seen that so many times, that entrepreneurs that persevere, they get through. When you look at Dun & Bradstreet, which is one of the research firms in the US, they show that so there's a 96% of businesses will fail in a 10-year period. But if you look at that statistic further, 90% of the 96% just give up one day. In other words, they're not put into liquidation. They wake up one morning and they say, I cannot do it anymore. It's too painful. And everyone's telling me to get a real job. So it's about, so I want them to push through. And the trick or the question that I ask entrepreneurs in that space, in fact, I've written a book called What to Do When You Want to Give Up. This is such a big thing in entrepreneurship. But the précis is, for as long as you can ask a different question and get a different answer, you carry on. The moment you can't ask a different question about your business and keep getting the same answers, that's the time, that's the indication to give up. And that's a skill that you can learn, to ask different questions. And that can also come from having mentors or other people external asking those questions to you and and going, and I've experienced that in my world where I was involved in a vehicle security business 20 odd years ago. I had creditors, I had people waiting in the lobby. I had a staff of 40 that I couldn't pay. A family friend took me out to lunch and started asking me all sorts of questions. And I kept saying, but like, it's all over, by the shouting. And he said, but tell me more about the technology. And I kept saying, but it doesn't matter because we've got no money. He says, no, that's a cash flow issue. And I went, and he kept saying, tell me more about the technology. And I couldn't see it. And I was so like in the pain, I couldn't see the opportunity. And he was going, it's just a cash flow opportunity. Within a week, I'd raised 3 million rand for that business because my whole perspective changed on that business. But had I not had that very fortuitous lunch with that individual, by the way, he paid because I couldn't afford it. If I'd not had that, then I would have definitely folded that business. And that it was a huge lesson for me that it was so on a knife edge and about your perspective more than what is the actually going on, because your perspective determines your reality. And so that's an incredibly important thing. And when this COVID thing happened, I phoned up my mentor and I said to him, like, what do I do now? And he went, like, I don't know. I've never been through a pandemic before. He's in his 70s. He's never been through it. And he said, but the one thing I want you to do is I want you to see this as your ship has come in. This is the biggest opportunity of your life. If you do not see it as the biggest opportunity of your life, you will miss all the opportunity because you'll become defensive. I want you to become aggressive and look for the opportunity. And it's exactly that not just myself, but I share that with everyone. It's such an important thing because there's no such thing as reality anyway. It's just your reality.
Okay, so I've got about 5 questions that are brimming over here, but I have to ask you first to just unpack that a bit, because most of us are going, COVID came from the left field and blindsided us, and it's just horrible. I mean, I could think of plenty of other words, but I'll stick to it with horrible. So how is COVID an opportunity, and how can businesses, even at this stage of the game, take advantage?
So everything's specific, and I cannot generalize because there's going to be somebody who's listening here who this isn't true for. And I would argue that if given enough time and enough questions, it could be true for. But, people are living in a reality of a month end and an overhead. So I don't want to take away that pragmatism of the experience. But I'm going to give an example. So one of the businesses that I invested in is an accounting business, a bookkeeping business, and run by an entrepreneur here in Johannesburg, and his clientele were all in Johannesburg. And then COVID happens, and he was so excited. He could go digital, and it was a digital accounting package, so that was fine. And his staff went out and worked from home, and it all was fine. But his client base was atrophying at a rapid rate, and he was in panic mode. So I said to him, well, change the name of your company to your company name International. And now start thinking about in the UK or other English-speaking countries that there are also bookkeepers there, and they're also experiencing this COVID thing, and they're also looking to cut costs. In South Africa, at the pound-rand exchange rate is incredibly appealing. So start calling the UK and Australia, by the way, and New Zealand, and start calling there and saying we can do the books on a platform called Xero, which is used globally, and we can do that for you on your behalf. And he caught one, and he got one, and then that one grew, and then he got a second and a third, and now a huge part of the business is international work. Now, had COVID not come around, and had he been in a defensive mode, it would be about keeping all the clients and trying to keep them happy. And as they of no fault of his own, if they were failing, he lost that client. But you extend, maybe the word that we're looking is not aggressive, it's expansive is the right word. So they have an expansive mindset and look now beyond. And a lot of the businesses that I'm involved in, as soon as they turned their head around and said, what is the opportunity? Then they could start looking for it versus there is no opportunity, it's all over.
Perhaps it comes back to to time, because sometimes when you're running a small business, you have your foot flat on the pedal and you're just running. I mean, a lot of people watching here today call themselves survivalists rather, and I'm not talking about micro businesses, but they are hanging in there by their fingers. Whereas COVID forced us to stand back, because actually we were all shut in our homes. We had to stand back, and maybe it gave you that time for reflection. And then you could think creatively, you could think laterally. I mean, perhaps we should have Friday afternoons dedicated to thinking about our businesses.
Yeah, so I'm a big proponent of that. I mean, I wasn't very good at it I have to admit, in the beginning, you're working 18, 19 hours a day, and the concept of giving yourself time to think, I think it's Nancy Klein wrote the book around time to think. And the whole thing is that you have a much stronger strategy, a much clearer construct of your business if you give yourself time to think. Over the last couple of years, I've been dedicating in my diary a weekly, it's called thinking time. And I'm at 2.5 hours a week now, where I dedicate 2.5 hours a week just to sitting in my office and thinking. I'm in my office right now, and I've got all the walls are made of that paint that you can do, you can write on. It's not paint. No, not blackboard. It's a whiteboard paint. So I use whiteboard markers, and so it's. And literally, I look like I'm in a kindergarten here, because I just sit and I stare at this and I think and I plan and sometimes I think you might even see me dribbling, because I'm very much focused about thinking about the business. And I've learned that discipline over time. I'm still a novice at it, but I highly, highly recommend that. So now I've up to 2.5 hours a week of think time. And I just basically draw on my walls and stare at my walls. Hopefully, I'm not going to be bouncing off them anytime soon.
And it's productive time. So I have to ask Marguerite's question, because, again, it's coming back to the difficulties many of us are facing. She's been retrenched. She's a highly skilled individual, but as a genealogist, I mean, should someone like that or should someone just start on their own, or should they try and find 5 or 6 other like-minded individuals? I mean, is it better alone or in a group?
Sure, it's a great question, that. And so I'll tell you what the research shows. The research shows that 2 is better than 1, and 2 is better than 3. And 4 is a no-go. So in Raizcorp, we get about 50 to 100 applications a day to join us. And if they come in as partnerships, as individuals or partnerships, that's great. As soon as there are 3 in the partnership, we go, oh, this is going to be problematic. And when there's 4, we will be courteous and look at it. But 4 people as a startup generally implodes. And the reason is that very often there isn't a common vision. Do you think there is a common vision? And I always play this trick with the entrepreneurs, is I ask them a whole bunch of questions and ask them to write them down, and then get them to read, the partners to read it to one another. And it's like they're on different planets, in terms of the what their vision is or what they think that they want in the future. When you've got 2 people, it's much easier for that partnership to work. But there's a couple of things that need to be in place. You should have this is ideal. You should have the same work ethic. If one person is playing golf all day and another person working hard, it ain't going to work. Number 2, you should have generally the same financial means. In other words, if somebody's got lots and lots of money and the other one person doesn't, then one is urgent and the other isn't, right? And so that creates tension. The third thing is around values, is that they should have the similar. I don't think anyone can have the same values, the similar values. The fourth thing is around that there is an understanding and an overt understanding of what the common vision is. The fifth thing is that they need to understand what divorce looks like. It needs to be spoken about like an ANC, anti-nuptial contract, what divorce, you have to have that discussion up front. And the last point I would say is that there needs to be an alpha in the team. And this is a very unpopular statement that I'm going to make, but there has to be an alpha in the team. And if you have two people vying for alpha, then it does implode. It becomes a big friction. So you have to have an understanding that it's going to be the front person and then the person who's in the back. And it can be, from an equity point of view, it can be completely equitable, but there has to be that structure. I've seen from my experience, it works far better, not far better, it works. The other structure, when there's two alphas, it doesn't work, they implode. So long answer.
Yeah, I'm nodding away with you because my husband got himself into business with 3 partners with an equal share among all of them, where one partner had profoundly different values and ended up almost decapitating the business because he stole so much money from them. And there are now 2 partners and the business is surviving but a much, much better model. So we have learned from painful and bitter experience. But we've got 5 minutes left and a million questions, but let's just try and get through a couple of them because this is a wonderful conversation, Allon. How do small businesses engage meaningfully?
Use that term again.
Sorry. Small and medium. How do littler businesses engage with those big corporates that are out there, many of which are quite dominant in their sectors? I mean, how do you get in as a supplier?
So, I mean, the question is how do another way to phrase that question is how do I sell? And that is to understand what your pain point is of your potential client and what they need. So how you get in is unfortunately, I'm very old-fashioned when it comes to this. To me, it's about these things, about knocking on doors, calling, emailing, networking. It's about every means possible and about doing that methodically. Okay. And when I say methodically, it isn't that we tried with this person this week. To me, when I started out Raizcorp, I mean, I was like 60-70% of my time was getting rejected. That's all I was doing was being rejected for 70%. The other 10% I was licking my wounds, another 20% I was trying to build something in the background. But I was out there trying to sell the whole time. And sometimes there was a gap between sort of what I had to sell and what I was saying I was selling. You know, there was that gap. But I knew I could close that gap. I often tell the story about I once got a deal and I phoned one of the people from the client. I said, okay, we've got it. It's called this. We've priced it at this and we're delivering it next week. And the person said, impossible. I said, I know it's impossible, but we'll do it anyway. And we did. We did it. So but it's coming back to the thing that's about knocking. And I can't give a more elegant solution than just and doing the research before and understanding what the pain is and trying to pitch your product at the right pain point and that the solution fits the pain point and then you've got a higher probability, but you are not going to get away with this without rejection.
Yeah. And what about, very sensitive question here, but what about smoothing the way in South Africa? Smoothing the way. What about corruption? What about paying to open a door?
So I mean, the obvious answer is that you should never do it because once you find that as a mechanism, you see that as the only mechanism to do it. And so even for not moral, as a non-moral response, it just, if I'm purely academic, once you open that door and you keep doing it, then statistically, it's game over at some point. Okay, whether it's after you know, it'll come back to bite you at some point, just statistically, because it becomes so easy to do that. So I'm not even talking about the moral, because I think the moral answer everyone knows. There are other ways to do that, which is through channel partners. You can design a channel partner agreement and look at influences in industries where they don't have the decision-making power, but they have influence to get you in. So channel partner strategies are very commonplace globally. If you look at Microsoft as an example, it uses a channel partner strategy. And basically they're saying, we don't have access to the client, you do, and we'll just channel through you. So you have the influence. And it's trying to think of it that way. I think that's a healthier answer.
Yeah, find people who can open doors for you in a legitimate fashion. Allon, we're running out of time. So I'm going to close off the conversation. I'm going to say thank you to all of our insiders who help keep us alive, who help fund Maverick. Many of you are sitting there on this webinar today and watching and listening and participating, and we are deeply grateful. Allon, it's been a fabulous conversation. There's so much to the sector that we still have to learn and unpack and live, but thank you for spending time with us. It's much appreciated.
Thanks so much, Sasha, and thank you to everyone for watching.
Okay, cheerio.